you have
This
to do is take
conference
your
will
Gmail.
now be recorded.
Great. So all you got to do is take your Gmail or take your, let's say, some kind of an ID and register it with Azure. And as and when you register it, Azure gives you something known as a tenant ID. This tenant ID is unique for every customer of Azure, every client of Azure. And this is how Azure really identifies you. When you go ahead and, let's say, create something known as an account, you get this particular sorry, you get this particular thing known as a tenant ID out here. After that, in order to start using the services of Azure, then I said that you need something known as an Azure subscription. So you'll have to subscribe to the services of Azure, and in order to do that, you will have to go into portal.azure.com, log in with your account, and once you've logged in with your account, you'll have to go under subscriptions, and you'll have to start adding something known as a subscription out here. And when you add a subscription, you have multiple options out here like free trail, pay as you go, and multiple things out here. So you have free trail, you have pay as you go, you have a lot of things out here that Azure really offers out there. Again, free trial, free for the first 30 days. You're going to get somewhere around 14,000 rupees in the form of credits, 14,000 or 14,500 rupees in the form of credits. And in order to register with a free trial, you'll need an Azure tenant firstly. After that, you need a phone number, an email address, and also a credit card basically to go ahead and register it with Azure subscription as such for a free trial. And you can have at max one free trial under a tenant at any given point in time. After that particular free trial is expired, you cannot, let's say, go ahead add a new free trial under the same tenant out here as such. So you have a tenant, and under the tenant you have a subscription. This is the model that we are, let's say, working on. It's a tenant subscriber model. So you have a tenant, and then under the tenant you have a subscription out here. So a parent and a child relationship out here. After this, we said, how do you actually add users? How do you, let's say, go ahead and share your tenant with multiple users out here? And that's where user addition came into picture, and we went ahead, started adding multiple users into our Azure tenants. So we added multiple users. Again, how did we add it? We just went into something called Azure Active Directory. After that, we went into something called users, and then we said new users, and then we said, okay, fine, create a new user or invite an external user, and so on and so forth. So once you create a new user or invite an external user, that particular user will be able to log in to the same tenant ID that you see, which is something like this. This is my tenant ID. The user who logs in with their own account, like user1 at the rate something.com or user2 at the rate something.com, will log into the same space like you as an administrator logging in. So you will share that particular subscription. You will start sharing that particular, sorry, tenant out here. And then I said, if these users need to also have access to your subscription, then you will have to add them under the subscription and give them something known as a role based access control, RBAC, role based access control out here. And then we said that Azure broadly offers multiple roles like owner, reader, and contributor. And then we were defining what an owner can do, what a contributor can do, what a reader can do, and how can you add a particular user into your tenant and give them that particular role out here. This is what we were doing out here. So yes, any questions till here? Anyone, any questions till here that I can take? Anything till here? Anything which is confusing till here? Anything till here that I can take?
Good morning, Suresh.
Good morning. Good, please.
Suresh, whenever we are adding a new user, right? So
Mm-hmm.
is that directly getting added to tenant or to the subscription? Or first we are adding to
So
the tenant and then we are giving, access to subscription.
correct. So first you're adding to the tenant, and
Hmm.
then we are then we are giving access to the subscription out here. So we are not directly
Hmm.
adding to the subscription. You can actually directly add to the subscription as well. You can give a role onto the subscription, and the user will automatically get added to the tenant as such. But normally the norm
Sorry
that
to
we follow.
continue.
Mhm.
I didn't get that. You said that directly I can also add into the subscriptions. How it is?
Yes, just go into the subscription and just do whatever we were doing earlier, like access control. I'll say add role assignment. I'll say
No,
contributor. Say next.
this is the role assignment we are giving now after adding the user to
Exactly.
the tenant.
No, even before you add the user to the tenant, I'm not adding
Hmm.
the user to the tenant right now. There is no user in the tenant right now that I do have. You can directly say xyz@gmail.com. The xyz@gmail.com doesn't exist in my tenant, right? I can
Yes.
send an invite directly from here. So either ways, it's okay. Either you add the user directly on the tenant and then give him a role assignment, or you want
Hmm.
to add the user directly from here and then go ahead and let's say send the invitation across. Everything's okay. But the convention here is to add the user into the tenant and then give him a role based access control on the subscription out here as such.
Okay, so here one more question arises to me. So
Okay.
as we are adding it directly to the tenant, as same tenant ID the user one or user two will be sharing, right?
Hmm.
If we're going to
Hmm.
the second part, like directly if we are inviting them through the subscriptions,
Okay.
so in that case also the user one and user two and so on will be having the same tenant ID what I am having.
Definitely yes, because your subscription is under this particular tenant. So
So
whichever subscription that you're adding the user into,
mhm.
the user will make or Azure will make sure to add the user into the same tenant as well. So yes, both
Okay,
the
so in a
users will have
basic
the same tenant
language,
ID. Mhm.
we can say that I own a space and I am
Mhm.
authorizing user one, two, three to use that space, but in a limited way.
Correct.
Is
Correct.
that what I mean?
Yes,
Right, right?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
No
I
problem.
have few more doubts,
Just
so I'll be taking it at the end.
sure. Sure. We'll take that in the Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yes, any more questions here, guys? Still here. Anyone? Any more questions still here? Good, please. Oh, sure. Okay. No, not the first 18 hours, I would say. Scripting will start later. Like, this is all the theory of it. So once the theory is completed, like it will take me one more week to do the theory of it. We are in the Azure Administrator, but the first 40 hours is going to be Azure Administrator. First 40, 35, 40 solid hours is going to be Azure Administration. Only then we are going to move into DevOps. Scripting automation will be covered as a part of Azure Administration itself. No, no, you don't have to. You don't really have to have a scripting knowledge to get started with Azure. You can get started with Azure. Scripting can come later. Correct. Okay. That's it. Yes. Yes. Correct. That's the only thing we learned earlier. All right. So let me move forward with this. So we have a tenant. Tenant is nothing but the account using which I'm logged into Azure. That's the tenant ID out here. For me, it is an account, but for Azure, it is called as a tenant ID. Nothing but a unique ID that Azure gives me whenever I go ahead and register an account with them. So they say, okay, fine, you have a tenant ID, so you can start using Azure, let's say the Azure services out here. After that, I then start creating a subscription so that I subscribe to the services of Azure so that I can start using, let's say, Azure out here. And finally, I went ahead, added the users and all these things, role assignments and everything. Great. Now, the very first thing that I actually go ahead and create on an Azure portal is known as something known as a resource group. Resource group is the smallest unit that you can actually start creating on the Azure portal out here. For example, let's imagine just drawing a very bare basic comparison between Azure portal and your local laptop. Azure is nothing but a cloud, local laptop is your local system out here. Let's say very bare basic, you are using Azure portal to store something, like you are using a local laptop to store something out here. The tenant ID is like an operating system. Without installing an operating system, you cannot literally start using your machine, right? So tenant ID is like an operating system out here. After operating system in your local machine, when you anyways create an operating system out here like Windows or Ubuntu, whatever it is, it'll ask you for some credentials. What is your ID? What is your password? So that whenever you can start logging, you can use that and etc. Subscription is like that user credentials, or I would say this is user credentials out here, or user accounts. Say I have user accounts, guest accounts, and all that stuff. After that, I go into my system. I want to now start storing it. I want to now start storing all my files and all these things out here. What else do we need, you think? Can I just start with this? Or do I need anything else? Or do I need anything else in my system to start storing something? Anything else that I'm missing? I have the operating system. I have the user login. I've logged in. You want to store. Where will you go? Where will you go to store your files? In let's say a system, a normal computer. C drive, drives, exactly. You
Yeah,
need drives,
hard disk, hard
hard
disk.
disk, drives, exactly. So you need the operating system, and after the operating system, finally you come into your C drive or D drive or whatever it is. Meaning drive is nothing but a space where you can start storing your files. Though you have your operating system, though you have the hard disk and etc., you have to now divide your hard disk and then use your space and etc. In the same way, a resource group is like a drive on the cloud, just an empty drive. Doesn't have a lot of significance. You can compare it like with the folders inside your computer. Like for example, in my computer, I would like to divide. Like I am a huge movie buff, so I watch a lot of movies. I hear a lot of songs and etc. I would like to divide things, telling that one folder for movies, one folder for let's say songs, and one folder for my books, and one folder for everything and all those things. I would like to arrange. In the same way, resource groups in Azure help you arrange resources or help you group resources. Like for example, you can say one resource group is for all the resources that will hold data, like storage accounts, SQL databases, Cosmos databases, and all these things, and you can group them together using one particular resource group. You can say the other kind of a resource group is for application, like you can have your virtual machines, you can have all these things out here. You can say third resource group is for network and all these things. So you don't, I mean, again, you do not need to have, let's say, multiple resource groups. You just need to have one to get started with. And using that one resource group, you can stack all your resources. So resource group is nothing but a logical grouping of your resources. Yes, please. Logical grouping of your resources. Nothing but you can compare it with the drives in your computer. So let's go there and let's put this in. Again, to create a resource group, you will need a tenant A, and you will at least need one subscription B under, let's say, in the Azure portal out here, and under which you can now start creating something known as a resource group out here. This is a symbol of a resource group in Azure. This is how it really look like, or this is the icon for resource group in Azure. Again, under one tenant, you can have multiple subscriptions, right? This is something that we discussed. Under one tenant, you can go ahead create multiple subscriptions, meaning tenant can be Tata, One subscription can be Tata Motors, the other subscription can be Tata Steel, the other subscription can be Tata Finance, and so on and so forth. So multiple subsidiary companies. Let's say you're under Tata Motors right now. Even under Tata Motors, you will have multiple teams like a development team, QA team, DevOps team, HR team, and all that stuff. For each and every team, you can also go ahead and create multiple resource groups. So if you see, it is now like a tree model. One tenant, multiple subscriptions, one subscription, multiple resource groups, one resource group, multiple resources under that particular resource group as such. This is how it will span out. And again, there is no limitation on how many resource groups that you can create. No limitation at all. There can be literally hundreds and thousands of resource groups that are sitting in the Azure portal. Just like you create an empty folder in your system. Same way, see, when you create an empty folder in your system, create 100, 200 folders, not a problem. Your system space won't be occupied. You'll occupy very little KBs of space if it's an empty folder. In the same way, when you create a resource group, there is no charge that you incur. There is literally no charge in the Azure portal that you incur. It's because this is an empty shell. It's just an empty resource out there that you create out there. So let's go back into the Azure portal and see how do we create our first resource group out here. Again, you'll need a tenant. I have a tenant. You'll need a subscription. I have a subscription. And under a subscription, I will now start creating something known as a resource group. So you can either come here, click here and say resource groups. So if I do res, I have something known as resource groups out here. Or you can click on these three dots out here on the left hand side and say resource groups. Okay, guys, can you please go on mute if you do not have any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, or you can come directly into your home page, and if you just scroll down under navigate, you find resource groups. So three ways in which you can come here, and I'll say click on resource groups out here. And in my case, I have one simple resource group called network watch or RG or something like that. In your case, when you click on this, you will see an empty telling that, okay, fine, go ahead, create your first resource group and etc. I say great. And now to create a resource group, I'll click on the create button. I'll say create. And now it's telling, firstly, it's telling you the description. Telling a resource group is nothing but a container that holds resources for an Azure solution. The resource group can include all the resources or can be managed, or you can group things out. That's what we were discussing. After that, just scroll down. It's telling what is the project detail. It's telling, okay, fine, what are your project details? Meaning, under which subscription you want to create this resource group. In my case, I have only one subscription. In your case, if you have access on the subscription, again, to create a resource group, you at least need to have a right access on this particular subscription, meaning at least a contributor role. At least a simple contributor role is what you need on this particular subscription out here. And since I have the role, it's telling, okay, fine, this is a subscription that you have a role on. You can go ahead, create something. I'll say, okay, great. Let me select the resource group. And it is now telling me that the name of the resource group. It's telling uh, what is the name of your resource group out here. I'll say, okay, fine. I'll give a random name out here. Telling it is developer hyphen resource hyphen group. A resource group that I'm creating for the developers inside my organization. And I'll just scroll down, and very importantly, it's telling what is the region in which you want to create this particular resource group. Again, coming back to the very first class, the very first demo session that we said is that Azure cloud is nothing but a provider called Microsoft has bought a lot of services or bought a lot of servers. Servers are nothing but physical space. They placed it into something known as a data center, and they are renting that space out to you out there in the cloud, in the form of a cloud. That's what a cloud definition really is. Now, now it's telling me, okay, fine. If you create a resource group, I will need some small space. I need to allocate some small space to you on a server that is somewhere that's sitting in some different region. And now it's asking me which region of the data center that you want to actually select. I'll say great, not a problem. If I just click this drop down, I will have all these regions out here. All these regions represent the data centers of Azure. everywhere where Azure has its presence. So since I'm a user in India, I want to create a resource group which is closer to me. I'll say India. I have three different regions out here, or three different, let's say, zones out here in India, which is Central India, South India, and West India. West India, Pune; South India, Hyderabad; Central India, I am not too sure on where basically the data center really is, but I can check and let you know. So I'll say Central India. I'll take some region out here, and next I see something known as what? Tags. Let's go there. Apply your tag to your Azure resource to categorize this and so on and so forth. Let's see. Before going to tags out here, just want to ask a very generic question. Did you hear this terminology called tag somewhere? Tag as in price tag? Heard something? Meaning very simple. See, if you go to a general shop out here, the general consumer behavior is something like this. You look at the price tag, then categorize the product, telling it's costly or cheaper or something like you can afford it on all these things. So tags, I can say, will help you identify something like a price tag or the ISO tags and all that stuff will help you identify something out here. In the same way, I am now telling that over a period of time, you will be having hundreds of resource groups created under your Azure subscription. Now, let's say my administrator comes to me and he asks me, can you tell me what are all the resource groups developers are working on? By the name of it, I can tell. Looking at the name, telling it is developer resource group, I can tell it. But what if I'm not following the naming convention? I'm just putting some random name out here and etc. It becomes very difficult to understand who's using this resource group, who's the owner of this particular resource group, and for ease of management. At a later point in time, let's say down the lane, 6 months later, someone comes to me and asks, who's owning this resource group? Can you give me their email ID? It'll become very difficult at that point to for me to, let's say, go down in my memory and understand why did I create it, for whom did I create it, and all that stuff. For which Azure tells you that you know what, you can add tags in the form of name value pair. A name is equal to a value, meaning I will say team that I'm creating this one is a development team. This is one name value pair or a key value pair is what we call. I will say owner of this particular team is developer@gmail.com, and I can keep adding multiple things. I can say phone number of this particular person, something like 99999, something like this, so that it makes it easier for me going down the lane, let's say 6 or 7 months, to understand who's owning this resource group, how are they really owning, which team is, let's say, really responsible for this and all these things out. And there are again no limitations on how many tags you can add. You can add multiple tags out here. If you have, let's say, cost center, you'll have a lot of things out here. You can add location, you can add a lot of things out here, and then I will say review and create. So what I did, I in the very first page, I said multiple details like what is the name of my subscription, what is the name of my resource group, in which location or in which region of Azure data center that I want to create this in. Then I came down to something known as tags. Then I went ahead and I said teams development and all these things out. Then in the final page, which is review and create, Azure will do a validation to understand whether the name, the location, the tags, all that you pass, is it valid? Are you following all the right conventions? And then it is going to give you something like a confirmation page telling that you know what, you are creating a resource group under this particular subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. Name of the resource group is developer RG, and these are the tags that you have given. Are you okay with this? And if you are, hit the create button. And as soon as you create the hit the create button out here, it took a second, less than a second actually, and it said resource group is created out here. This is how you can create your resource group. Let's create one more. This is for the developer. I'll create one for the tester. So I'll say create. I'll say this is tester, tester hyphen resource. hyphen group. I'll say this is India again, Central India. I can again say a team is testing. Owner is someone like test@gmail.com, and then I can say something like phone number is something like 888, something like this. It's a review and create this out. So I'm going and reviewing, creating this out, and I'll say create. So over a period of time, I will be having multiple resource groups like this. I have tags, I have a lot of things out here. And the advantage of this one is that, let's say after 6 months, my administrator is coming to me and is telling now, can you tell me what are all the resource groups that are owned by a person called developer@gmail.com? I'll say, great, not a problem. I'll just come here into the Azure portal and I'll add a filter here, telling add a filter, and filter here is nothing but owner. I will say is equal to developer@gmail.com. I'll say apply this out. Now I am only seeing what? One resource group, because I added a filter wherein I'm telling the owner, the tag called owner is equal to developer@gmail.com out here. Over a period of time, this developer might be having multiple resource groups out here. So you can do a combination of conditions. You can say owner is this one, whose phone number is something like this, whose team is something like this, and etc. And you can add multiple filters in order to filter out all your resource groups out here as such. Again, just to recap, resource groups are like empty folders in the cloud. In order to create a resource group, you will need a subscription. In order to create a subscription, you will need a tenant. This is the hierarchy what this is following. And you will need at least one resource group to start your journey with Azure. At least one resource group, at least one folder in order to start your journey with Azure. And we'll see more concepts on the resource group out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here? Okay, voice is not audible. My connection is stable, but I'm not getting audio. Again, people in the entire class are able to, let's say, listen to me. So I think there's some issue at your end. I would say please drop and rejoin the call, and that will kind of help you out. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here on what are resource groups out here in Azure? Anything till here?
Yes, I have a question.
Good, please.
Yeah. So when we are going and creating a resource group, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just give me 1 minute. When I click on create,
Okay.
there is one thing, resource group. You have typed like testing hyphen. Is that required to type hyphen and all those things? Why can't we type only testing or something else?
You can type, not a problem, but I am following a convention. If you look at this, I am following a convention telling it is hyphen resource hyphen group. It's just the naming convention that you're following, that's it. Sorry, it's not mandatory.
Okay. Is that
It's
my
not a mandate. No, it's not
that's
mandatory.
what.
That's what you're saying. It's not a mandate. See, you can name your folder telling my computer hyphen my files. I'll name it my files.
Hmm.
It just depends upon what your organization prefers your resource groups to be called. Normally, when you are working in a project, you would like to have a pattern. You would like to, let's say, have a pattern in which you're naming your resources, so that later in the future it's easy for you to filter things out. So if I see developer hyphen resource hyphen group and hyphen my project name, I'll be able to understand, okay, fine, these are all the resource groups which are, let's say, my project out here for my particular project out here, and so on and so forth. So yes, it's not a, let's say, convention, or sorry, it's not a mandate. It's just a convention basically that you need to follow, so that you can identify your resources at a later point in
Basic question. I don't know this is the right or wrong,
time.
but I think I have a doubt on it.
Okay.
Like whenever we are creating a resource for just example for developer, okay, and we
Okay.
have given the user ID and the name and phone number you said, right?
Okay.
Uh, if tomorrow that person left the organizations,
Okay.
so in that case, how we are going to rectify it?
So that's the reason we don't give a email ID of one particular person. We give the email ID of an entire delivery list.
Mhm.
DL. I'm giving an example here telling it is developer@gmail.com, but normally you don't give one particular person out here. You give a delivery list out here. Delivery list contains a lot of people. So even no matter who leaves, someone gets added back again. So that particular delivery list will always be alive as such.
So if some person is leaving the organization, direct automatically his email ID and everything will get deactivated.
Email ID of the person will get deactivated, but not the delivery list. There is a difference between the person's email ID and the delivery list out here. Delivery list is nothing but a list of
Mhm.
email IDs that basically you basically have, and you add
Okay.
in the tags, you add something like a delivery list email ID out there. Like developer@gmail.com is not a
Okay. So
person;
here,
it's a list. It's a group. Yes.
yes, yes. So here also we can export a CSV files just as we did in this subscription.
Yes, you can export a CSV file out here to get the details of all your resource groups and etc. into a comma separated value as such.
Thank you.
Yes. Any more questions, sir? Yes. Any more questions? Yes, sir, please. Not grouping the people. It's grouping the resources. Resources like, sorry, no. User is not a resource. User is an actual person, like you, like me. We are the actual people out here who create resources. Like for example, you have your laptop. You're creating folders. Are you creating folders for users or are you creating folders for files? Files, exactly. Same thing applies to Azure. We are creating resource groups to create resources later. And what is a resource? Is like, for example, you want to store something in the cloud. If you want to store, there's a resource called storage account into which you store something. You want to, let's say, create a machine. There's something called virtual machine. That is a resource. All these are resources in the cloud out here. And to create any resource, you will need at least one resource group out there. Okay. Yes, go ahead, please. Correct. Is it possible to edit? Okay, good question is that I've created a resource group. Can I edit it? So my question back to you is that what is the thing that you want to edit it? Name, location, mail ID, and all these things are. So if I go here inside the resource group, if I click on a resource group, there are these tags. You see edit option here. You can edit the owner and then you can edit all these things. You can edit all these fields. Let's say this is not developer. This is developer one. You can save this. Now if I just scroll refresh, now I see what? developer1@gmail.com. This can be edited. Can you edit the name? No, you cannot edit the name of a resource after it is created on the Azure portal. Rule number one. I'm sorry. Not subdocument, I would say. No, subfolders. No, it's like till here, it's like till folder structure out here. After that, you cannot create a resource group inside a resource group. That's something that you cannot do. You'll have to start creating resources inside a resource group. But again, to answer to your question, can I edit the name of a resource group? No. Once you create a resource group, you'll have to live with that name. You cannot really edit the name out here. That is the rule number one. Rule number two is that if you create a resource group in a location called, let's say, Central India, here, my location here, if you look at this, Central India out here, you cannot change the location of any resource in Azure once it's created. So two things, name and the location in the form of, let's say, in the resource group is something that you cannot change. You cannot, let's say, change at later point in time. If you want to change it, meaning if you want to say that, you know what, I want to change this hook or crook, I want to change it. The only option is to delete the group and recreate it. The only option out there that Azure gives you is to delete it completely. So there is an option to delete the resource group. You can delete it completely and then recreate it. You'll have to recreate it. So the name, the location is something that you cannot change after you create this out. Okay. Yes. Mhm. Correct. Correct. You can move those resources. If you already have a lot of resources under your resource group, you can create a new group with the name, the location. You can move all your resources under a different group and then delete this out. So you have an option to move it. Do we have any backup? No. You cannot recover once it's deleted. So even that's the reason. If you click on delete resource group, this is what it tells you. Deleting the resource group is irreversible. The action that you're about to take can't be undone. Resources in it will also get permanently deleted. If you're okay with it, type in the name of the resource group. If you're sure about that, then I'll go ahead and delete this out. So I'll just copy this name. If I place this here, this is where my delete option will come into picture. So deleting a resource group should be a little cautious procedure. You'll have to understand why you want to delete it, if it's an empty resource group, what it is, and etc. And then go ahead and delete the subject. Yes. Any more questions here? There will be multiple users. Okay. Yes. Anybody can delete. That's again coming back to the role that a particular person has. Mhm. You need to give some roles again. Correct. When you add the users, you give some roles. Again, roles are divided into owner, contributor, reader. Owner can do everything. He's like an administrator, meaning he can create the resources and also delete the resources. Contributor has all the permissions like an administrator, but he cannot add users, which means even a contributor can come here and delete this out. That's the reason we give specific role assignments, telling that you can add resources here, but you cannot delete something. So you can go ahead and do some custom roles out here so that you can then control who can delete, who can read, who can write, and all that stuff. Good question. Is there any chance to put a lock? Do you see here an option called locks? You can lock your resource groups out as well, which we'll see on how do you put a lock and what happens when you put a lock out here and etc. So yes, is there is a chance to go ahead and lock your resource groups so that people do not accidentally delete it. Okay. Okay. Created a resource group in a different region. Okay. Okay. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Correct. Okay. Okay. Correct. Yes. Again, it can be in a different region. Shouldn't be an issue. It can be a different. Yes, it can be a different region. Yes. Yes. Any more questions here? Okay. Let me take one question online. Let's see. Sir, if I want to create the same resource in a different location, is there any possibility to create? Good question. If I want to create the same resource group in a different location, guys, please go on mute. Just a second. Guys, please go on mute. I'm getting a lot of disturbance out here. Okay, thank you. Sai Chandra, do you have a question? Okay. So the question here is that someone online is asking is that, sir, if I want to create the same resource in a different location, is it possible? For example, let's say I take the same resource group name. So it's developer hyphen resource hyphen group. I go into my resource groups, and this is in central India. I want to create the same resource group in East US too. So I'll say create. I'll place this here. And do you see what is the error that I'm getting? In the same subscription, meaning in the same subscription, you cannot have two different resource groups with the same name. Even though the location is different, you cannot have the same name out here. A resource with the same name already exists in the selected subscription called Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. But let's say you have a free trial subscription. You can take this name and create it. Doesn't stop you. It doesn't really stop you out here. You can go ahead, create your own resource groups with the same name out here as such. So the thumb rule here is that the name of the resource group should be unique inside a subscription. So just again, giving an example, Tata Motors has created something, a subscription called, or a resource group called developer hyphen resource hyphen group. Tata Steel, who have their own subscription, can create the same resource group name. Shouldn't have an issue out here. Yes. Any more questions still here? Okay, let me delete these subscriptions right now and let's see. I now have two different resource groups in my Azure portal. Just ignore this because this is something that got automatically created. So I'll just delete this out for now. So I'm just copying the name, placing it here, deleting this out. I'll also show you how to delete the resource groups again. So let me refresh this again. It'll take some time to delete it out. So now I have two different resource groups. One is a developer resource group. The other is a testing resource group out here. Here, please hear my condition out. I want to add two users into my Azure portal. One is called as a developer, or let's say not developer, but user one. Let's say user one out here. The second is a user two. User one belongs to the development team. User two belongs to the testing team. The condition what my organization is now telling is that user one should only and only have access to a resource group called what? Developer. User 2, who's a tester, should only and only have access to the testing resource group out here. Is this possible to achieve? Do you think this is possible to achieve? Yes, no, maybe. Let's see that. The very first thing that I'll do is I'll create two users. One is called user 1, the other is called user 2. Let's create both of them. Let's see how it, let's say, works out. So I'll go into the Azure Active Directory. I'll go into users, and in the directory I'm going ahead and creating a new user out here. I'll say create a new user. I'll say user 1. User 1 at the rate something.com. In your case, it can be at the rate tatamotors.com, or it can be tatasteel.com or something like that. I'll just scroll down. Let's miss this out. I'll just scroll down. I'll say this is user 1. I'll just scroll down. I'll say this is, let me choose a password. I'll say let me create my own password out here. And I will say the job title is a developer. Saying the job title now is a developer out here, and I'll say create. Successfully created user 1. I'll go ahead and add user 2 out here. I'll say new user, create new user out here, create a user. I'll say this is user 2. I'll say this is user 2 out here. Just scroll down. I'll give a password. I will say job title tester. I'll say create. So two users have been created. They'll get reflected in a second. One is a user 1 who belongs to a development team. The other is a user 2 who belongs to a testing team out here. I created the users right now. What do you think is the next step? How do I do a role assignment? IAM, where should I go to do the role assignment?
Resources. Resources.
Resources,
First, we have to
meaning
first we have to give access to subscription, right?
first we have to give access to the subscription. Good point. So I go here,
And
I say add role assignment. And let's say I am adding a role called
and then contributor.
contributor. I'll say next, I'll say add members. I will search for user 1. I'll say select. I'll say review and assign. Review and assign this out. So this user 1 is being added to my subscription as a contributor. Now let me take that user ID. So I'll go into the Active Directory, say users. I'll say user 1 out here. And this is the ID of the user. This whole thing is the ID of the user. Copy this out. Go into an incognito window. I'll say portal.azure.com out here. Place this one telling user at the rate something. I'll say next. I'll give the initial password out here. And it's now asking me to change the password. So I'll do that in a second. And I'll say sign in. Once I sign in, it's going to ask me skip for 14 days and all that stuff. I'll say no. So I am now inside the Azure portal. Again, if I go into Azure Active Directory, I am literally able to see the same, let's say, tenant. So logged into the same tenant like the administrator did, but the tenant ID is different. And let me go into something called as resource groups.
Can't see the screen.
Can't see the screen. Let's see. I am still sharing the screen. Can everyone see the screen online, guys? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Looks like there is some issue at your end. Please drop. I mean, please rejoin. Yeah. Okay. So I'm here, and what I'm able to see, both the resource groups, developer and tester. I'm able to see both of them. But am I supposed to see both of them? Yes. No. My organization is now telling me that this user one that you have should only have access to what? Developer resource group. User 2 that you should have should only be having access to what? Testing resource group out here. But I am able to see as a user 1, if I log in, this is user 1 at the rate something. I log in, I'm able to see both the resource groups, developer and tester. Why do you think this is happening? Location is same. Okay. Subscription, sorry.
Resource group we have not assigned to any role.
Resource group assignment. Okay. Okay. But why do we think this is happening right now?
Because in the same subscription we have
In the
and
same
under same
subscription we
tenant
have,
ID.
under the same tenant ID, which means that when I gave a role assignment, I gave a role assignment called contributor to this particular user at the subscription level. This is where I added, or this is where I went ahead and did a role assignment to a user called user one out here. As in when you do a role assignment at a subscription level, which means as in when you do a role assignment to someone at a parent level, which is a subscription in my case, all those users will inherit the permissions to the child level as well. Meaning this user will not only be a contributor at a subscription, he'll be a contributor at resource group 1, resource group 2, resource group 3. Which means let's go ahead and check this access. I'll just go back into the Azure portal. I'll go into the subscriptions. And here I am logging in as a user 1. If I click on Visual Studio Enterprise subscription, go into identity and access control and see view my access. It's called what? Contributor at what level? This resource, which means what resource this is? Subscription. I'm a contributor as a subscription, which means it's selling this resource. Let me come back to the resource groups. One of the resource groups I'll go into. Even under the resource group, there is something called what? Identity and access management. Let's go there and say view my access. What is it telling you? Contributor, scope subscription, bracket what? Inherited. Meaning you got this inheritance from the parent, which is the subscription. So whatever is the access that is there in the subscription just got inherited into the bottom layer, which is your resource groups out here. Now my question is that, or my assignment for you all to let's say today's session is that please try this out. I'll in which ways cover it out, but I want you to try it out before you go ahead and do it. I want user one to only be able to see developer resource group. I want user to only be able to see tester resource group out here. Tell me how can you achieve this? Tell me how can you really achieve this out here? Do a Google search, see the documentation, see how this is achieved, and then we'll continue the session from tomorrow telling how this is achieved and how can you go ahead and do this out there, etc. But what I want you all to follow is the underlying concept on what do you mean by inheritance. This is something that I want you all to check out. Yes, any questions still here? Okay, let me take questions that is there. Yes, we can see. Yes, correct. Yes, any questions still here? Good, please. Hmm? Okay. 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 Mm-hmm. Correct. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. You delete that one, you won't be able to create something. Correct. Correct. Mm-hmm. Again, yes. Yes, you can do that. Again, that's the reason we kind of suggest to be a little careful before creating a resource group out here. So in your case, let's say your question is that I have a test one in let's say a location called Central India. I have resources inside it. And in a different region, I also want to go ahead and let's say create test one, which is not possible because you already have test one out there. So you want to do something like this. You have a test one, you have resources under it, you want to migrate it into a different resource group out here, but you cannot create test one until you delete this out. So this is what I'm going to do then. Test one, I'll create one more resource group in the destination region that you want. Let's say East US, called test two. Migrate all my resources from test one to test two. Delete test one. Recreate test one in the destination region. Migrate everything. Delete test two. You'll have to do a makeshift arrangement because that's the reason. Again, it's a very tricky process to delete a resource group and create the same thing out here once again. So it's a makeshift arrangement that you do. Or if you have another subscription, you can create your resource group in another subscription and then later migrate it after you delete the test. Reason being, once a resource group is created, we firstly check before adding resources, is that name okay? Is it everything okay? And then we later go ahead and let's say start using that particular resource group here. Yes, any more questions here?
One question I have. Yesterday when I
Just
invited, Mhm.
Deepak, just a second. I'll just take a question in a second. I'll just take a question offline and come back to you. Yes, go ahead, please. In Azure, we cannot roll back anything, not anything. There are a few resources that you can roll back. You need to delete. There's a few things that you can roll back. Direct parent resources cannot be rolled back. Parent resources like, let's say, resource group is a parent resource. If you delete a parent resource, all the child resources inside that will also be deleted, undone. You cannot undo that particular procedure. So parent cannot be undone. Child resources, a few can be undone. We'll talk about those things as well. Yes, Deepak, go ahead, please.
So yesterday, what I tried to invite, for the user. I invited my
Hmm.
old Gmail account. I have
Okay.
my Gmail credential and passwords. But when I
Hmm.
accepted invitations, it was asking to
Hmm.
enter a password. When I entered my Gmail password, it's saying that it's
Hmm.
incorrect.
Correct. It's not the right password. It's not Gmail password that you need to give. It's the Microsoft password that you need to give. Meaning your Gmail account should be firstly registered with Outlook, and then you need to go ahead and let's say give that particular Outlook password out here.
Okay, so that Gmail account I have never registered with any Outlook.
Correct. So you'll have to let's say firstly create an let's say Microsoft account using that particular Gmail as such, and then go ahead and start using that out.
Then another question arises, if some clients come to us, okay,
Hmm.
as you said that we can invite them. So
Okay.
first we have to ask them, please register yourself on Microsoft account, and then you can provide that email ID to us so we can invite you.
Correct.
But whenever he register, he gets a tenant ID, right?
No, he doesn't. I'm telling not to register with Azure. I'm just telling register with Outlook or register with Microsoft.
Okay. I
Right?
got
There
it.
is a difference between registering with Azure, registering with Microsoft as such.
Okay, we have a tenant ID and there is one doubt of object ID. So can you please go to that
Mhm.
page once where we
Okay.
see tenant ID to the Active Directory?
Okay. Tenant ID in the Active Directory. So I'll just go back into the tenant ID out here. And
Yesterday when I was
this,
researching, I got this. There is a tenant ID.
correct.
Like whenever I register, okay, so I get a tenant ID,
Correct.
right? With the same name, I was able to see when I go in users, I was able to see with the same name that is called object ID, but different IDs.
Okay. So when you create a user, when you say you're creating a user, for example, I have a user who's called DevOpsLearning@gmail.com.
Yes,
And this user has something called as an object ID out here.
yes, same email ID we are using. So we have a
Hmm.
tenant ID, but with the
Correct.
same in users we are getting as a object ID. So what is the difference between these two, and why we are getting one separate tenant
So
ID and one separate
two
object
different
ID?
things out here. Two different things out here. Objects are nothing but whatever you create under your tenant. For
Sorry,
example,
I missed one point. Here, sorry, I got one. On the right corner, you can see classes at the rate DevOps at something is there, right? But here your
class.
mail ID is different. Use under user mail
Okay,
ID is different. But for
just a
me, it
second.
was
No,
coming
no,
same.
just a second. Just a second. Just a second. This is not my email ID. This is my email ID. Good with this? This is
Ah,
classes
yes,
Azure DevOps. This is something that I have.
yes,
I also have an object ID.
yes. This was the question I had.
When exactly whenever you register something with Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory is nothing but the telephone directory, like a telephone directory out here. So in a
Okay.
telephone directory, if you want to let's say register multiple things out here, you will give serial numbers 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Instead of serial numbers, Azure
Mm-hmm.
Active Directory is identifying each and every user with something known as the object ID out here. Meaning, if I copy
Okay.
this object ID, go into
Mm-hmm.
my let's say Azure tenant, and if I'm searching my tenant with this particular object ID out here, I'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
find the user. So for Azure, it's an object ID out here. So whenever you create a new user, that particular user is going to get something called as an object ID out here as such.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All right, I'm a little top of the hour right now, guys. So I will park more questions for tomorrow. Well, please check this assignment out. Please see, go to Google, just try to search it out. I don't need a solution. I just need, let's say, to see how you search things out. That's it. And in tomorrow's session, we'll answer those out. Okay. Thank you.